ahead and get started today. For those of you who have no idea who I am, my name is Stephanie Gage, and I am the BIN project coordinator at CCLC. BIN stands for Benefits Information Network, and our purpose is to help people understand how working can impact benefits and how you can actually work and receive benefits. It is possible. So today, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. I would first of all love to thank you for attending. I know that your time is really precious, and I 100% appreciate you having an interest in this and joining me, taking some time out of your day to spend with me to learn about this. I would also like to thank you to the Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center, which is another project at CCLC, who is bringing this webinar to you. This webinar and the PowerPoint will be on their resource page after the presentation. So if you want to access that later on, you'll be able to. So the BIN project is through CCLC, the Center on Community Living and Careers at IIDC, Indiana Institute on Disability and Community. And like I said, our purpose is to help people understand how you can work and receive benefits. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. Okay, and hopefully you guys can see my screen. Wendy, if you can't, let me know. Okay, so today, like I said, we're going to be talking about benefits, Social Security benefits, and transition age youth. It is a really critical point for people to start getting into the workforce and understanding that they are able to work and receive benefits. The reason that that is so important is because there is this huge fear that once you go to work, they're just going to take your benefits away. And that is just not true. There is a lot of misinformation out there, unfortunately, through friends and families and other people. People have heard all of these stories that their benefits just stop, and that only heightens that fear. And that can actually put up a barrier for someone to even to start to pursue that path to employment. So with the correct information and understanding that there's so many safety nets and work incentives out there to encourage people to try to work and alleviate that fear, people can successfully remove that barrier and start pursuing their path to employment. So I'm going to start out with explaining that there are actually more than one type of Social Security disability benefit, because that is a common misconception. I think I've been in this field for 11, 12 years, and probably only about 25% of the people I've ever worked with have known what type of benefit they receive. They just know I receive a Social Security disability benefit. There are actually two different types of disability benefits, and depending on which one you're receiving, working impacts these completely differently. The first benefit is Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI, and the second one is Supplemental Security Income, or SSI. And actually, I forgot to say this before we go any further. There will be a question and answer segment at the end of this. So if you have any questions as we're going through, please write them down or put them in the chat box. And once we get to the end of the presentation, I will definitely go through questions and answers with you guys. Okay, so getting back to the two types of disability benefits. Most young people are receiving Supplemental Security Income, or SSI. And this is the needs-based benefit. It is for individuals who are low income and have few resources and haven't worked enough to build up credits to be able to receive SSDI. It can be received as a child or as an adult, and the amount that somebody receives in this benefit is based on their living situation and the income that's coming in. But the most somebody can receive in an SSI check in 1 month in 2019 is $771. And that amount usually goes up yearly based on the cost of living adjustments. You may be saying, well, that's not a whole lot of money. And no, it is not. Because this is the gift program, it is intended to just meet a person's basic needs, such as food and shelter. So it's not a lot. But a great benefit to this program is that it comes with Medicaid health insurance. The second program is Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI. And as the name says, this is our country's disability insurance program. So when you get your pay stub and part of it's taken out, a portion of that goes to pay essentially a premium into this disability insurance program. So this one can be received if you're 18 or older, and if you yourself have worked enough to build up credits to draw off of your own work record, or a parent's work record if your parent has worked enough and is either disabled, deceased, or retired. So it can be received either on your work record or a parent's. The amount that somebody receives in SSDI really varies depending on how much they've worked and put into the system. So one person may only receive a $200 SSDI check, while somebody else may be drawing $1,500 a month. It really varies based on how much you've worked and put in. And with this one, you get Medicare health insurance. So these programs are very different. We're going to start out with going into SSI, since this is the one that most young people receive. And with SSI, there's something important to note. Because it can be received as a child or as an adult, when somebody who's receiving it hits the age 18, between their 18th and 19th birthday, they're going to go through something called the age 18 redetermination. And essentially what this is Social Security makes them reapply for SSI as an adult. And the test for that is more stringent. As a child, it was just, is your family low resource and income, and do you have a disability or impairment? Once they hit 18, they're going to add the work element in and say, okay, are you low income and resource and have an impairment, and can you work at a certain level or not? So sometimes people are deemed to no longer meet that definition of disability. But the good news is there's something called Section 301. If somebody goes through this age 18 redetermination and they say they're no longer eligible, but if they're participating in a training program, like maybe with vocational rehabilitation, or they have an IEP with a feasible job goal and steps to get to it, they can continue to have temporary SSI benefits while they complete that training program. So that's a good thing to note. Another thing about that age 18 redetermination is sometimes people weren't eligible for it as a child due to their parents' income. But now they may be eligible for SSI because they'll be looked at as an individual, and their parents' income wouldn't make a difference in their eligibility for the benefit. When looking at how working can impact those SSI benefits, Social Security has a really cool thing with SSI. They are not going to just take their full check away. What they do is reduce it down based on earnings. And they actually count less than half of their monthly earnings from work. So pretty much everybody is going to have more money by working and receiving a reduced check than they would just sitting at that base SSI rate. So when they adjust somebody's check monthly, what they do is they're going to look at their gross income from work and try to make it look smaller. So to be nice, they exclude the first $85 that they earn, and then they divide that amount by 2. So what a person's gross earnings are and what they call countable income is vastly different. Then they take that base SSI rate and subtract those countable incomes to determine what their new monthly SSI check's going to be. And I have an example to show you, and I know this looks really complicated. We're not going to go into depth. I just want you guys to see how this works. This is what's called the countable income formula, and this is actually what Social Security uses to determine what somebody's SSI check is going to be. So that first example I have is if somebody is not working. So down at the bottom, what their monthly income would be, that base SSI rate of $771. The second column shows if somebody was working 20 hours a week and making $8.50 per hour. Well, their gross earnings here would be $688. So that is what they're going to get from work. But in Social Security system, they want to make that number look less. So after they do their magic and exclude the first $85 and then divide by 2, their countable income goes down to $301.50. So they take that $771 minus that countable income, and their new SSI check is $469.50. So yes, it is below that $771, but when you add their gross income from working back into the equation, down at the bottom, you can see their total would be $1,157.50. So that is a lot more than $771. And I think that this is really important for individuals with disabilities to see that with SSI, it really does benefit you to work and get a slightly reduced check. You're going to have more money. The last column there, I have an example of somebody who's actually working full-time. So you wouldn't normally think somebody who works full-time would still be eligible for an SSI check. But let's say they took on 40 hours and they're still making that $8.50 per hour. Well, in this example, their income from work would be $1,376. And again, after Social Security does that magic, their countable income goes down to $645. And after they take that from that base SSI rate, they're still going to get $125.50 in their SSI check. And when you combine those, that amount is almost double what they would have had just staying on SSI. So in this case, they're going to get a little over $1,500. So that is really important for people to understand, that it does benefit you to work and get a slightly reduced SSI check. So just to make things a little bit better, Social Security can actually exclude some other things or take some other things into consideration when they do that calculation. And the first is my favorite work incentive. It's called Student Earned Income Exclusion. And this is a huge way to incentivize students to try to work and build up that work habit. It is for people that are under 22 that are regularly attending school or a training program. And it allows them to keep all or almost all of their SSI check and all of their earnings from work. They could actually make up to $1,870 in a month and keep their full SSI check. that is a huge amount of money for a student to be making. It's over like $2,500 for them to be able to bring in, and it doesn't impact their SSI check. There is a limit, a yearly limit. Only the first $7,550 they make is excluded. But as we know, most students never earn at that level. So a lot of cases, their entire earnings are able to be excluded for the full year, and they can keep their whole SSI check. And the reason Social Security does this is to really help students understand that working's a good thing. We all work because we love it and love our jobs, but another reason is that we're able to live a better life, right? We're able to go out and have dinner with a friend, or watch a movie, or buy something that we really want. The same with a student. If they see that they're able to, maybe buy some VR equipment and play video games and meet their friends and be able to do stuff, they're going to say, oh, this working thing's pretty good. I think I might want to continue to work. So this is a great incentive for them to try to work, get out there, maybe build up that work habit, and maybe not just sit at that SSI rate, to really see what it's like to thrive instead of just survive. Another way that Social Security can help somebody on SSI is through impairment-related work expenses. Unfortunately, if you have a disability, life is just more expensive. We know that. They have expenses that not everybody else has. If you have an impairment-related work expense, or an expense that is related to your impairment and needed to work, Social Security can reduce your countable income. I'm going to give you some examples of that. So things that you pay for out of pocket that are necessary to work and to stay healthy would be things like medical equipment, or therapy costs, prescription copays, or maybe if you have to take special transportation. When Social Security adjusts your gross earnings and your countable earnings, they can take these into consideration. So I have an example. John's working and earning $585 per month, and he receives SSI. He takes special transportation, so he spends about $50 a month in that, as well as has $50 in therapy costs. So I have an example of what his SSI check would look like before he gets that impairment-related work expense approved by Social Security, and after. So before they do their magic, and his countable income is $250. So when they take that base SSI rate minus that $250, his adjusted SSI check is $521. But if he gets that impairment-related work expense approved, after they take that $85 exclusion out, they can also deduct that cost for those expenses. So now when they divide by 2, his countable income is only $200 or $50 less. So when they give him his SSI check, it's going to be $50 more. So instead of $521, he gets $571, which essentially puts half the cost of those expenses back in his SSI check to help him pay for it. So these are good ways for people to maybe receive a little bit more in their SSI check. Another example of this is blind work expenses. If an individual is listed as blind in Social Security system, they can actually exclude almost all work-related expenses. And in this case, it doesn't actually have to be related to their disability or their vision. It just has to be an expense that they need in order to work. So examples would be like state and federal taxes, childcare that they pay for, maybe union dues, or the cost of their service animal. That can be very pricey. Uniforms, meals that they eat at work, transportation, reader services. There are so many things that could be considered a blind work expense. And with this, instead of only getting half the cost put back in that SSI check, they actually put the full cost of these expenses back. So this is an amazing work incentive for individuals that are listed as blind with Social Security. But the burning question for a lot of people is, okay, that sounds great. I'm on board to try and work, and I know they're not going to take my full check away, but what if I work so much that my SSI check goes to zero? Well, there is actually a wonderful safety net called 1619B, and this does two things. It allows a person who is on SSI, but their earnings drop to zero because they're earning so much money, to stay on those SSI rolls if their earnings reduce and they need that check again. So it allows them to stay on the rolls and they can just pick that check up. The second thing it does is allows them to continue to have Medicaid coverage for at least 12 more months, even if their check goes to zero. And for some people, that's more important than that SSI check. They're like, I don't care about losing that small SSI check, but I need my Medicaid coverage. So this is a way to protect that for at least 12 months if they're below a certain threshold. And that threshold this year is $38,506. But even if they did go over that or are past that 12 months, there is this amazing category of Medicaid called MedWorks. And it is specifically for individuals with disabilities who are working, and it allows them to have more resources and higher income and keep Medicaid coverage. Depending on earnings levels, they may have to pay a small premium for it, but it does allow them to continue that coverage. So now you have seen that with SSI, it's adjusted down. There are lots of great work incentives that are associated with it, especially for a student. And there are ways to safely try and work, and if you need that SSI check again, to be able to pick it back up. But what about that other benefit we talked about? So now we're going to switch gears to the earned benefit SSDI, or Social Security Disability Insurance. And this one works vastly different from SSI. It is an all or nothing benefit. You either receive the full benefit or you don't get it at all. But they have these great safety nets and timelines associated with it. And the first wonderful timeline is something called trial work period. It is 9 months that they allow a person to give their full effort to their employment goal. And no matter how much they make during that time frame, they're still going to give them their full SSDI check. So you can go out, try to work, and we're going to go ahead and keep giving you your check. But if you make over a certain amount, we're just going to say you used one. And that amount this year is $880 in a month. So if you have gross earnings of $880 or $8,000 in a month, they'll just say you used one trial work period. You still get your SSDI check, you've just used one of those. Now you have 8 left. And some people use these all in a row. Other people, it may take them years to use them. It may take them 3 years to use all 9 of those. Some people never use them. If all you can work is up to, $700 or $800, you're never going to use those trial work period months. So your earnings are never going to impact that SSDI check. But this is a great incentive to help people try to work and try to go at their full effort and have that safety net there. So after somebody finishes those 9 trial work period months, however long it takes them, Social Security then starts looking at a different number. They're going to look at a person's work effort is at what they call substantial gainful activity level. This year, that is an amount of $1,220 in gross earnings, or for a blind individual, $2,040. And if your work effort is above that amount, you don't get your SSDI check. If it is below it, you do. However, there are some really great work incentives even if you go over that SGA level. The first is a wonderful safety net called the extended period of eligibility. And this is 3 years of protection where Social Security is going to look at your earnings month to month to see if you're above that SGA level or below it. So instead of completely being terminated if you go over, your check is just paused, and then they'll look at it the next month, and they can hit the play button or the pause button as many times as needed based on where you're at with your earnings. Now, there are also some ways that Social Security may be able to ignore some of your gross earnings when they look at what your countable earnings are, a lot like with the SSI program. One great thing they have is called subsidies and special conditions. And this is, they realize that a lot of times, if you're an individual with a disability, you may have some accommodations made at work. You may be receiving some extra assistance from a supervisor or coworker, or maybe a reduced productivity rate. They may give you more frequent breaks or a modified schedule, or even fewer or modified job duties. If this is happening and Social Security knows about it and your employer says, yes, this is happening, they can put a price tag or a value on that accommodation. And when they look at your gross earnings, they can reduce it by that value. So for example, I had an individual who worked at the Marriott, and he only did 7 out of the 10 job duties that were for his position. The 3 that were too hard for him, they gave to coworkers, and they said, you're doing a great job, just focus on these 7. We were able to get a 30% subsidy put in place for him. And when they looked at his gross earnings, they ignored 30% of his earnings, which put him under the SGA level, allowed him to keep his SSDI check and take on more hours at work. Another thing that works like that subsidy is called impairment-related work expense, which should ring some bells because we talked about that on the SSI side. This is valid for SSDI as well, but it works a little bit differently. It works like the subsidy to reduce gross earnings and countable earnings. So for example, if I'm working and I'm making $1,300 at work, I'm over the SGA level. Social Security might pause my check. But if I let them know that I spend about $200 a month in prescription copays and therapy costs, and it's approved, when they look at my $1,300, they're going to ignore $200 of it and pretend like I only made $1,100. Well, this would allow me to keep my SSDI check and have greater earnings. So there are some really great incentives to let people test their ability to work, try to work at a fuller effort if they're able to, and if they need those safety nets there, they're there. The last safety net is for individuals on SSDI who do work so much that they completely work their way off their SSDI check. So instead of their check just pausing, it actually is stopped or terminated. Well, they can request to be reinstated to benefits within 5 years of losing that check, and Social Security can give them 6 months of provisional benefits or payments while they determine if that person still has a disability. So this is a great last safety net that says, hey, you know what, try it out. If you're not able to do it, we can welcome you back. So I hope that by now you have seen that reporting to Social Security on a monthly basis is really important regardless of which benefit you receive. And the most important thing to know is that Social Security does not know what a person earns monthly. A lot of people think that they do. They do not. Unfortunately, there's no crystal ball. They do find out at the end of the year what your earnings are, but they don't know month to month. And that's why it's crucial for every beneficiary to report their earnings monthly so that Social Security can track what they're earning. If they're on SSI, correctly adjust that check, or if they're on SSDI, either give them a check if they're due it or not. If this is not happening, too often people end up with overpayments. And that can be devastating, especially for people that are on fixed incomes. And it's something that doesn't have to happen if they just reported. So if you don't remember anything else from this webinar today, if you know somebody who's receiving benefits and starts working, or you are somebody who receives benefits and starts working, please report to Social Security. It is super important. And not too hard. I have 4 different ways here on how to report your earnings. You can report online through My Social Security account. You first have to go to Social Security and let them know who you're working for so that they can put their employer ID in. And then you can just report through My Social Security account. A second way is to take your pay stubs, copies of them, to your local Social Security office. I say copies, you want to make sure you keep the originals because it's really important if Social Security ever says they didn't get them, you can pull out the originals, as well as when you're there handing in your copies to make sure you get a receipt. That is proof that you did turn in your pay stubs. And if they ever came back and said we didn't receive them, if you kept that receipt, you can show them and have proof that, nope, it is not my fault, I did turn them in. The third way would be to mail copies of your pay stub to your local Social Security office. If you do this, they are supposed to mail them back to you a couple of weeks later, and that should be proof that they did enter them in the system. I do recommend, if you don't receive them back, to contact your local Social Security office to inquire about that. And the fourth way is only for SSI recipients. You can actually call a toll-free number within the first 6 days of a month and report the previous month's earnings. Or there is a way to do it through an app, but that's only for SSI recipients. The next set of things I'm going to talk about are asset building resources. And I think it's really important to note we're talking about how it's great for a person to work and to start making money, but we also don't want them to just spend every dollar that you make. But saving can be tricky with benefits because there are resource and income limits associated with benefits, especially those means-based benefits. So these are ways that an individual, especially a young person, where it's a really critical time for them to start setting goals and building for a better future. So these are ways that they can safely build on their assets. So I have down ABLE account, individual development account, plan for achieving self-support, and trust funds. And I'm going to go into each one of these. The first is ABLE account, and that stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. And this is a really, really great way for an individual with a disability to save for qualified disability expenses and not lose their eligibility for Medicaid or Social Security benefits. These work like a 529 account, so they can save, and actually the first $100,000 saved in the account is not looked at by Social Security for SSI purposes. So you can set aside $100,000 in your ABLE account and still remain eligible for SSI and Medicaid. Pretty awesome, right? And qualified disability expenses, the list of what qualifies is pretty expansive. Some examples are school, housing, maybe to pay rent, or pay for modifications for your house. Equipment you might need, you know, be it laptops or motorized wheelchairs. Even for a vehicle or to modify a vehicle, this is a way that you can save for that. And not only is it limited to just an individual saving, their family or friends can also put money into that account. Anybody who wants to contribute to somebody's ABLE account can. There is a max amount, and that's $450,000, a mere $450,000. And there is an annual limit of $15,000. But I definitely recommend people looking into ABLE accounts. I think they are amazing. Another thing I love about them so much is that it gives the person more independence with that money. Sometimes with trusts, they have to get approval before they're able to take money out. This works like a debit account, and they're actually able to take the money out to purchase these expenses. The accounts are audited, so they do have to go for those qualified disability expenses, but you don't have to ask permission first. And I think that, you know, that really gives people a sense of independence and control over their money. So down at the bottom, I have a link to Indiana ABLE accounts. That's a great way to save money. Another really awesome asset building resource is individual development accounts. And not a lot of people know about these, but this is a great way for somebody to save for, it has to be earned income, so you have to have money from work to be able to put into it, but to purchase a lifelong asset, such as maybe going to school or training or buying a home or modifying or rehabbing a home or purchasing a vehicle if it's for employment or school purposes. And these also are not counted, most of them are not counted as a resource for SSI, Medicaid, or other benefits that are means tested like SNAP. So a person's able to save and continue to have their benefits while they need that extra support there. And here's the really cool thing about it. These are actually a matched savings program. So if you save $25, $75 is put in the account. Now you have $100. Who doesn't want free money, right? I wish my bank account worked this way. It does not, but this is a great way for somebody to be able to save and to have help in saving. Another great feature of this is it actually comes with the requirement that a person has to have financial literacy training, classes, and counseling throughout the process. And for some people, I think that that may be even more important than this free money or matched money, because Although a lot of us received help from maybe our parents or somebody in our life who has helped us understand how to be financially responsible, a lot of people don't get that. And so that's a way for them to access that help for free. So down at the bottom, that can be accessed through the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. They can find their provider. It's based on which county you live in, so I definitely recommend looking into those. A third way to build up some assets and resources safely is through a plan for achieving self-support. This is another work incentive through Social Security. See, they really do have so many work incentives. This is a way that they can set aside money for a specific work goal. So this one has to be for a work goal, and it is not counted for most means-based benefits. But what Social Security does is they actually replace the money that a person is setting aside in that pass in their SSI check. So essentially, they're able to save money without feeling the hardship of that loss of income. Some examples of things that a person can set aside a pass for would be for school or a training program, maybe to start a business, if they need tools or equipment for a job, or for a vehicle or modifications if it's needed for a specific job goal. I love passes. I have set up a lot of passes with people. Some examples, had someone who wanted to be a barber. So we set up a pass plan first for his training. And then after he finished that training, he needed money to fund for tools. It's pretty expensive. Those supplies are not cheap. So we were able to get a pass plan set up for that as well. I had a lady who was working with vocational rehabilitation to start a kennel, but they would fund for part of it, but not everything. So she used VR's help, or vocational rehabilitation's help, and that pass plan to be able to save up to save for starting her business. And an example of a vehicle, I had a lady I worked with, a wonderful lady who was a CNA, and she was already working, but she got offered a full-time position. Unfortunately, it was at night, and she rode the bus to work, so she wasn't able to take it, except for she was able to set up this pass plan and save money so that she could buy a vehicle so that she could take that job and work during the night as a CNA. So at the bottom, there is a link to Social Security's website and some great information on PASS. I love it. I think it's a wonderful work incentive to help people save for a job goal. One thing to note is with somebody who's receiving Medicaid and is on a Medicaid waiver, so they're receiving waiver services, there is a income limit that they can earn up to. It's called the special income limit, and this year that amount is $2,313. And those that exceed that may no longer be eligible for Medicaid or their waiver services, unless they're receiving Medicaid through that 1619B, MedWorks, or they have a valid Miller Trust set up. So I wanted to mention that because that brings us to trusts. There are two different types of trusts we're going to talk about. The first is Miller Trust, and this is specifically for waiver recipients. And the whole purpose of this is if they have excess income over that special income limit and they need to keep those waiver services, this is a way for them to set aside that excess income and protect their waiver services. So there's a link there on information about setting up a Miller Trust. The other trust is a special needs trust, and this allows individuals with disabilities to put aside excess resources in order to maintain their eligibility for benefits. So ABLE is one way to set aside excess resources. This is another way to set aside resources. And a lot of times these are set up maybe if you have an inheritance and you need to set aside that money, or a lawsuit settlement comes through and those excess resources need to be put away so you can keep your benefits. These are arranged through private attorneys, or they can also be part of a pooled trust, such as an ARC special needs trust. So those are all different ways that somebody who's on benefits and needs to maintain their eligibility for benefits, at least for a while, to be able to try to set goals, set aside for assets, and be able to reach their goals and not jeopardize their benefits. I think it's really important to understand where to go for help. Obviously, this is just dipping your toes into some resources for help. A way that a student can access continued help is through vocational rehabilitation, which can give them supports to get on a job and maintain employment, or maybe if their goal is to pursue continued education or training, or for individualized benefits counseling. The BEN project is funded through vocational rehabilitation. So if somebody is working with vocational rehabilitation, they can ask to have individualized benefits counseling. And what that can provide them is not just general information, but specific to them. This is the benefits that you're receiving. This is your work goal. These are all the work incentives that are available to you. And this is how working could or could not impact your benefits based on your specific situation. These are very general things that I'm giving you today, but it's really important that a person's able to understand it on an individual basis. The next way they can access help is through the Ticket to Work program. This is for individuals that are 18 to 64 and either receiving SSI or SSDI. They can access supports and services to, again, get a job, maintain employment, and receive individualized benefits counseling. So through the Ticket to Work, they can find more information on employment networks or vocational rehabilitation. They have options as to who they might want to assign their Ticket to Work to for that help. And they can also access that benefits counseling through what's called the Work Incentive Planning and Assistance Program, or WIPA project. So here are some great websites. The first is for vocational rehabilitation, how to find your local office. The second is for the BEN program. We have really great fact sheets that are available to everyone to explain work incentives. I gave you guys a handful today, but there are many more that you can access through that website, as well as towards the bottom, you'll find one that are specific to transition age youth. Feel free to, print those out, hand those to students or parents, and be able to give them access to those resources. Ticket to Work program, that Choose Work website is a great way to get information on how to utilize your ticket, how to assign it, and then Social Security office locator. It is really important that a person understands where their local office is, because that is where they need to be reporting earnings. I do have my contact information here. We are going to try and get to some questions that you might have, but if you have questions beyond this or didn't want to ask it in front of everybody or need resources, please feel free to contact me. Again, Instruct is going to be putting this on their resource page, a link to this, so feel free to access that at any time. Now I am going to stop sharing my screen and go to the chat box to see if there's any questions. So at this time, feel free to, ask any questions you have. I'm more than happy to answer any. Okay, one question was, will we repeat when this webinar will be posted? I'm not sure, Wendy, do you know when exactly this will be posted? I would guess within the next week or so, and that can be accessed through CCLC and Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center. And again, thank you for them for hosting this. Okay, and a great question. Is parents' income or assets figured into SSI? That's a great question. If they are a child and receiving it as a child, it could affect their eligibility for SSI to begin with. As an adult, so when they turn 18, it's not going to impact their eligibility for SSI, but it could impact the amount that they receive. If they are still living at home and not paying their fair share of rent, Social Security will reduce their SSI check by a third. It's called in-kind support and maintenance, because they say, well, somebody's helping to pay for a portion of your food and shelter. So we're still going to give you an SSI check. We're just not going to give you the full SSI check. And that amount this year for that reduced rate is $514. Again, next year, the SSI check is going to go up a little bit. The actual figure is $783 in a month is how much it'll be next year. And then another question, can you charge your son or daughter rent if they're over 18? And the answer is yes. That is actually a really great way for some people who are receiving that reduced rate to be able to maybe receive the full SSI amount. However, Social Security is going to look at the total income for the house and like the bills and mortgage, things like that, to determine if the person's meeting their fair share. And if they're able to meet their fair share with that rent, they can increase it to the full rate. But if they're not, if they look at the household expenses and they're like, well, that $200 you're paying in rent is not going to meet your fair share, then they will either keep it at that lowered rate or calculate a different rate. Any other questions? Those are some great questions. Okay, the question was if you have to wait till you're 18. You can probably start the process, but 18 is when they would be looked at as an adult. Before then, they would be looking at them as a child and your income would come into factor. So I would get things prepared so that once your, son or daughter turns 18, at that point, you can be ready to apply. And you can actually apply online or by going to the office. So there are several ways, or for individuals who are homebound or not able to get to the office, you can actually call and set up a phone meeting, or you can call and schedule a time, which is great because then you don't have to go to the Social Security office and sit and take a number and wait. Okay, can I give the website to apply online? I can see if we can get that to you. If you email me, I can get that specific one to you. But if you just go to, if you Google Social Security benefits online application, that's a way you can do it as well. But if you email me personally after this, I can get you that link. And we have a couple more minutes. If anybody else has any questions, I'd be more than happy. Oh, thank you for putting my email there. I appreciate that, Anne. And yes, that is my email address. So if you had a question and you didn't feel like asking it in front of everybody, or it pops up later, I know I'm notorious for, sitting up in the middle of the night and thinking of something that I should have done or should have asked. So feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions at any point. I actually really love this stuff and find it super interesting. So I'm more than happy at any time to speak with you. Okay. Well, I think that about brings us to our time. So I really, really, again, want to thank you for attending. I hope that this was informative for you and gave you at least a base knowledge and where to go for more information on this. And I know it can be confusing and seem overwhelming, but there is help out there with understanding it. And I hope that the message got across at least that you can absolutely work and receive benefits. There's a way to safely do it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to INSERC for hosting this and allowing me to share information with everyone.
It looks like there's one more question, Stephanie. It says,
okay.
Be posting copies of your PowerPoint pages as a resource.
Yes, that will be on there as well as if you want to listen to this riveting webinar, but we will also just have the PowerPoints on there as well. So feel free to share if there's somebody else that you think could benefit from this webinar, let them know where they can access it so that they can get that information, the correct information. We really want to make sure that people know how to access correct information and to get that message out there. Okay, well, thank you again, and thank you to Jane for typing for us. I really appreciate it. And Anne and Wendy, I appreciate your time as well. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.